when will a mafia or any of those gangs get their hands on a quantum computer? Maybe not in a decade. Okay, the world is not what the world used to be 2 years ago. And now people are thinking, yeah, but okay, some governments might actually get their hands on one of those computers much more earlier because clearly they will have the resources. And who tells us that a fraction of the usage of those computers is not put to the service of espionage or I don't know what, right? So what used to be a problem for a decade from now is now a problem of today, because to make things harder, people are discussing, well, you could harvest today and decipher tomorrow. If one of those governments is going to have a quantum computer in 2 years from now, they could be spying on our communications today, load them on a server, and then decipher them, because all the cryptography we have today is crackable in minutes with one of those computers. So it's actually
everything falls off a cliff.
And it's actually quite dangerous because
Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. We're back in the studio again after our week of debauchery in Barcelona. That feels... I'm still feeling the pace a bit. I had a bug. I
felt tired this week.
I think I had coronavirus for a week after.
Yeah.
So that's not ideal. But anyway, enough about me. I'm delighted to say that we've got a special guest on this first one back, Rafa de Fermin.
Yep.
Fermin. I'm trying to pronounce it. You're Spanish, so I'm trying to pronounce it properly. I actually get to practice. That's the one time a year I get to practice my Spanish is in Barcelona.
So you're extending it now.
I'm extending it now. But as we just discussed briefly in my shitty Spanish, I'm not good enough to do a podcast in it. And besides, it'd be a bit unfair on Ian, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I'd just be drinking beer for the whole podcast.
Just sitting there heckling obnoxiously from the side. But I can say encantado. And thanks a lot for coming over. Apparently you came over specially, so I'm really flattered. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
And I haven't said why you're here. You could just be some random bloke. You are...
Some random Spanish bloke.
Random Spanish bloke, yes. Yeah, that's what it is. We've just been to Spain and we just brought some Spanians.
He looked okay.
He's like, he's all right. He just won't stop following us around.
Exactly.
We bought him one beer.
Exactly.
No, you're our senior vice president at Nokia Networks infrastructure business in Europe. And that covers IP networks, fixed access, and optical networks. So, like in my Scot language, we've got how many chunks are there? Well, there's the mobile bit of Nokia, which is in total headed up by Tommy, isn't it?
Tommy
Wheato.
Yeah.
And then yours, the Nokia Networks infrastructure is what I would call the fixed, but I'm going to encourage you to correct
Elaborate
my
on
bad
that.
use
Which
of
is still
terminology.
Federico Guillen.
That's true. Another Spaniard, by the way.
Another Spaniard.
Another Spaniard. That's
there's
basically
obviously
Finns and
it's
Spaniards.
Getting dangerous. This thing's getting
Lots
dangerous.
of people flying over Central Europe between
Exactly.
Finland and
Is he
Spain.
based in Madrid?
He is, yeah.
So there's a concentration of the sort of infrastructure talent in Madrid.
Must be. Thanks for the talent part.
I can confirm that there's plenty of talent in Madrid.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was I going to say? I got thrown off there. And then they got the
cloud software and services.
That's it. That was the fourth one, and then we got the IP.
Yeah,
what
technology.
I unkindly call the
IPR,
patent troll
yeah.
division. I'm sure you would disagree. So yeah,
Nokia Tech.
Nokia Tech. There we go. So anyway, so that's the bit you're in. So it means that one thing I've got to say. On Telecoms.com. And I suspect, I don't know, I'm not going to speak for Ian or light reading. And I know there are bits of light reading. I mean, the name of light reading is more from the optical and fixed side, isn't it? On Telecoms.com, we do...
20 years ago, just optical.
There we go. That's the light bit is a play on words if people didn't understand that, light being optical.
I don't think most of them do. They're like, why are you called light reading?
Yeah. When you're pretty fucking far from light reading. So I don't tend to... cover it so much. So, I mean, what I'm going to start, I'm deliberately abbreviating. We normally have about 10 minutes of me talking bollocks about just random stream of consciousness stuff. But you got a hard stop because you got to fly back
I
to
got to
Madrid.
fly back, yes.
So I'm going to cut the bollocks short, although we might have the odd tangent as time goes on to talk about Mobile World Congress, because that was obviously in Spain, Barcelona.
Yeah.
And you were there, weren't you?
I was.
But I'm going to just pass the ball straight to you, Rafa, and just say, do you think I'm mistaken to have Telecoms.com write about fixed line stuff as little as it does?
I think you should talk a lot more about the fixed lines, about IP, about optics, about FTTH, fiber rollout.
Right. So sell it to me.
To be honest, the more mobile communications advance, the more they are an even bigger part of fixed networks with a smaller part of mobile networks. Cell size gets smaller, more reduced, you got to get further with fiber, and then you got to transport it all. And the more you want services to be run on that mobile part, actually you don't run those services on the mobile part alone, you run them end to end. So it doesn't really matter if the mobile part is able to do 100 things, if those 100 things cannot be transported over to the core and to the subscribers and to the end cell sites on one side or to the data centers on the other. So really the network is more fixed than mobile, although the mobile part is visible because we all carry a phone with us, right? But
And
behind
the
that
towers, I suppose.
exactly, but behind the tower there's a lot of fiber and IP and optical networks.
Fair enough. And is that well, I'm sure you're going to say yes, but I'll invite you to elaborate. Is that in a constant state? We're always writing about mobile, about the latest sort of evolutions. Obviously, we got the Gs, which I'm increasingly getting bored of, by the way. Maybe interested to know if you've got a perspective on that. And then we hear about sort of novel technologies like Open RAN and all that sort of thing. Is fixed in a similar state of constant evolution? And if so, what are some of the things that we need to be aware of right now?
So there's a lot of evolution on fixed, a lot. Sometimes it goes together with mobile, because one of the things that the fixed line do is backhauling mobile, as we said before, but sometimes on its own. I mean, here in the UK, people are rolling out fiber at an incredible pace, but that has happened already, for instance, in Spain. Basically, almost everybody in Spain has.
So it's quite ahead of the game in Spain, isn't it?
It's quite ahead of the game. They started
Why
quite
is
early. To be honest, I don't really know why it started in Spain. There were some things happening. For instance, Telefónica bought Movistar, the Canal Plus satellite service in Spain, and potentially they could imagine that putting that content on top of a proper fiber network would give them a step advance versus competition, but then obviously competition had to follow. But it could be that there were other factors at the same time. It's difficult to understand exactly why some countries went a little bit faster than some others. But at the end of the day, everybody's going fiber.
Yeah.
So the FTTH rollout on its own is quite a big innovation. And again, both the mobile access and the fixed access actually demand a lot from the transport networks behind. So there's continuous innovation over there.
I heard a theory a couple of years ago. One of the reasons, because the UK had lagged for a long time and not had any fibre to the home, and that's sort of changing now with the Openreach investment. But someone said to me that the southern European countries had moved ahead more quickly because local loop unbundling was a lot harder there for regulatory reasons, whereas here it was made incredibly easy. So you just had this influx of people doing effectively reselling ADSL, and it kind of discouraged investment in fibre, whereas in Spain I think it was more awkward to do it. So but I don't know how accurate that is.
It could be. I lived through the ADSL rollout in an earlier Telecoms life, and you could see how people were rolling. There's so many factors affecting one decision. From what the regulation was, you're completely right. Regulation was very important, from the EU regulation that affected a lot of countries to each country regulating, and sometimes even each region sub-regulating within the country or making public money available for smart cities or for some kind of rollout that was made easier by people wanting to develop the region, the city, the country, whatever it was. But then there's competitive reasons. There's even geography and population. I mean, some countries are just easier to roll out than some others. If you're concentrated more into larger cities, it's a lot easier to roll out a fixed network than if you have the same population spread all through the country.
Right.
So
Which
there's-
applies to Spain on that. Is it quite...
which to some extent applies to Spain. I mean, you've got big cities like Madrid and Barcelona and Valencia and Malaga, while the rural areas are quite empty,
Right.
relatively empty compared to how
France
people
or
live in the
something?
UK, as an
Or
example.
UK, yeah, right,
So,
okay.
but again, I don't think it is just one single reason. It's
Yeah.
all at the same time in some way, and then things happen. It's not that easy, I think.
You've got a lot of MDUs, haven't you, in Spain, multi-dwelling units, I think.
But
Somewhat
not
like
anymore,
Germany.
actually, not anymore. I
Okay.
mean, we get fiber to
anybody.
each flat. Yes.
Right, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
There's a final part that I suppose is harder to do, and that probably is the final part that is not rolled out in Spain.
Yeah.
But it's just about done.
So
really.
it's gone sort of fibre to the curb in some areas, and you've still got the last bit that's copper in
I
some
think not
rural
even
areas?
because
Right.
I don't really think so. Whenever
It's
you
just indoors,
because,
really.
because whenever you could actually get with your fiber all the way to a basement, you would just complete that really.
Right.
So I think it's really fiber to the home in most places in Spain.
We were chatting outside, and we were just, I think before we came on, wondering about the distinction between the three bits that Nokia tends to break it down as: IP networks, optical networks, fixed networks. Can you just sort of talk about the distinction? Because there is a bit of overlap, isn't there, in terms of...
No, it's fairly simple.
Okay.
So what we call fixed access is really the access part, the final mile, but it's not really a mile. But you see what I mean? It's the final drop connecting a house, connecting a user with the first place where this house communicates with the network. The first place where it touches the network, that is your access. That used to be copper. It's now predominantly fiber. It will be fiber over time for everybody, except the places that are anti-economical, and then you do fixed wireless access or whatever you decide to do, but that's the access part.
Yep.
Once you're at that first point in the network, by the way, if you come wireless, we were talking before about the Gs, if you come 4, 5G, you end up also in a first point in the network. So from those first points in the networks, you've got optical communications. There's an optical layer typically that connects one point to the other, to the data center, to the peering points where you actually move traffic outside of the country, et cetera, et cetera. That's your optical fiber. And on top of that, you've got your IP network. Those are the three components of the fixed network.
I still didn't get what the difference between the optical network and the IP network is in what you just said.
So you get optical communications, which are fibers where you put a laser at both ends and they communicate. What you decide to put in the laser is driven at what in the ISO OC model is called level 3. Optical is at the level 2. If you go to the level to the third layer, the one who decides which kind of information you put, to whom you address it, is the IP layer, the routers.
Right.
And the routers...
Does
routers,
IP stand for Internet Protocol? in this
Internet
case?
Protocol.
Yeah.
So the routers would effectively build packets, and the packet is some content. This is what I want to communicate to you, and there's a header, which is the address. It's your address.
Yeah.
And you pack many of those packets because I want to send a packet to you, but I want to send a packet to him as well. And there's a lot of people sending packets to lots of people. You put them all together. You send them to the optical driver, and they send that piece of information to whichever other end.
How do you send them to the optical driver? How do they? Is that the difference?
There's really a connection between the router and the optical node.
Right.
There's a local.
I suppose that's the thing. It could just be as much a sort of pedantic or semantical point that I'm making. But when you talk about IP networks and optical networks as distinct things, they're very interconnected.
They are very interconnected. This is the transport of the network.
Right.
And there are advantages which are probably a little bit too deep for why you would have the two networks, because you really optimize what they do. One optimizes on transporting big chunks of data. The way you put that into the fiber is extremely interesting as well, because you try to pack as much information in the fiber as you possibly could, because what they try to do is they try to be effective. They try to send information as far as possible, because some of those links are pretty long, and they try to put as much information as possible. So, for instance, They use different colors, effectively different frequencies, like in mobile, rather than the air. You've got a fiber, but actually it's the same thing. You put different colors.
I know, it's a cool concept.
And you try to pack as much information in each of those lambdas as you possibly could. While IP is different. IP, you're optimizing about the intelligence of the network and how you manage the information, et cetera, et cetera. And that division of roles actually helps optimize the networks.
Makes sense.
How's the market looking at the moment? Because, and I do remember during sort of COVID, and I think afterwards, there was quite a big boom in the fixed line side, which is to do with people extending fibre to homes even more. But has that changed a bit? Is there one bit that's kind of growing more at the moment, or?
So first is the fundamentals of the market are still positive, and I think they will be for quite some time. The world runs on telecoms. I mean, what we do is very important. And as I explained, the world runs on those fixed communications, probably even more than on the mobile communications. I mean, we found that wasn't evident for many people until COVID came. And we all went back home and we didn't stop. I mean, we continue working through Teams or Zoom or whatever it was. And we still had some fun, probably a bit less than we had when we could get out, but there was still, we could watch movies. And so there were a number of things that we could do thanks to telecoms. I think the whole world understood how important telecommunications are.
Do you remember some of those slightly conflicted and tragic social events that we had over Zoom? At the time, they were better than nothing, but you look back on them and it's just like, Jesus Christ, did we really get pissed over Zoom?
Of course, because there was nothing better to be done. But in any case, I think that showed to the world, if this had happened, I don't know, 50 years before, the world had stopped. The world would have stopped simply. I mean, there was no way to conduct any business whatsoever. And we didn't stop at all. I mean, there were businesses that simply carried on. And I mean, even businesses that you would never think. My wife's a school teacher.
Right.
She teaches English, actually. So her English is better than mine. But she teaches proper. She teaches proper English to 9-year-olds. And you would imagine you need to be face to face with them. And of course, you want to be face to face with your kids.
Yeah.
But for some time, they conducted classes over Zoom or Teams or whatever they chose. They didn't stop.
Google Classroom was quite big.
I remember it going on in our house, with the kids at the time. But,
I mean, I was impressed by it at the time, by how quickly schools adapted. And that's where you got to give credit to companies like Google, much though we resent their sort of virtual monopolies in certain places, which we might come on to later if we've got time. But then again, they just gave these tools for free, as to the best of my knowledge, or certainly at minimal cost, to loads of people to enable that. And so we've got to give credit where it's due to these big digital monopolists. They do enable a hell of a lot of stuff. They just get a lot for it as well.
I think a lot of people did a lot of very nice things over COVID. I mean, you reconcile? Yeah, maybe.
Reconcile, yeah.
You reconcile yourself a little bit with humankind when you see that people actually were ready to help out. And
that was good.
There's a
initially
there's a lot of good anecdotes.
Started squabbling again.
So it's not too bad. And then again, back to your question.
Yeah.
The fundamentals are still there. People will want to do more and more over telecoms. People will want not just us residential users. You start thinking about businesses and industries. They will want to start running more and more of their processes over the telecommunication network. Everybody talks about AI these days, but whether that is AI or any other kind of workload, there will be more things that people won't do necessarily in the same building where they operate heavy machinery or whatever. There will be more effective ways of doing things by having specialized compute centers that are somewhere else, and you need to communicate. And that means of communication needs to be good. And the definition of good is it can't be cracked. I mean, it needs to be secure, because if you're relying for your industry or your industrial processes or whatever it is, you're relying on that telecommunication link. It needs to be up and running all the time. It can't be affected by DDoS attacks that put you out of service or something.
I'll tell you another one. Sorry to butt in.
Sure.
Something I wrote about this week. It can't be affected by people dragging their anchors through the Red Sea. I don't know if you saw that.
I saw that.
Yeah.
I saw that.
And so, and it was interesting. I actually, so I covered this story. I'll for our audience who doesn't know about it. There's aggro going on in the shipping lanes of the Red Sea right now because the people in charge of Yemen are called the Houthis, and they like to chuck their blowfish at ships that are going past because they're pissed off about what's going on in Gaza.
Yeah.
That's my geopolitical assessment of the situation. And so they've been having go at ships, and then about 4 submarine data cables got cut in the Red Sea. And so there's speculation about whether this was deliberate sabotage or not. And in the story, I wrote a story and then I got a follow-up from someone just saying that no, what they reckon happened was that it was a ship that got attacked and they panicked and put their anchor down and it didn't take in the way anchors are supposed to. I'm no expert on anchors, unless it's Cockney rhyming slang. And so it dragged along the seafloor and cut these cables. Anyway, the point of the anecdote is not to veer us into scary geopolitical territory, but the redundancy built in there was such that I don't think anyone's batted an eyelid, even though 4 submarine cables got cut. So that's an illustration of what you're talking about the robustness of the system.
Exactly. So there's a slogan that we have in the company, and it's a little bit more than a slogan. We say we build mission-critical networks. And actually, that's what we mean. Those are, you need to, if you've committed that there is a performance that your end users expect from that telecom link or network, you deliver that performance. And it's safe, it can be hacked, it can be compromised. I mean, if people steal that precious data that those companies are putting over that telecom line, if that information is stolen, it jeopardizes the company itself. So there's a number of things that you want to guarantee, which we summarize as mission-critical networks. But to be honest, when I talk to people, you immediately realize, yeah, of course, for sure, that's a mission-critical network because we have that company that we just said is putting industrial processes on top of telecoms. Sure, but what about watching football on TV? I mean, people in my country would not be happy if the El Clásico would be off because the telecommunication network is down. I tell you.
I mean, imagine the histrionics.
That probably would be felt in Spain as a much tougher situation than any industrial processes being disrupted.
Are you a Real Madrid fan?
I'm actually more of a basketball guy.
Okay.
So football, I'm not
going to draw you on football. Okay, fair enough. Anyway, sorry, you were saying.
No, but so okay, maybe not to the same level, but these days, almost all telecom networks are mission-critical networks, really.
Are you? You mentioned AI. Are you seeing that sort of trigger new investments on the fixed line side at the moment, or have any kind of impact at all on traffic levels at the moment?
So I think it will impact traffic because it will certainly drive specialized nodes where things will happen because it will be more effective to do AI processing in certain places and not necessarily at the endpoints where those results need to be delivered. So for sure, that will drive traffic significantly. Again, back to the fundamentals. There will always be, because anything that happens in society, well, not anything, but many things that happen in society drive more traffic from telecoms, which is why I think this will always be a business that will be fundamentally growing, right? AI will do. We are starting to see the beginning of the AI era, if you want, but the sky's the limit. And maybe
the Skynet's the limit.
Many things that actually we can't even imagine these days. Many of those technologies get launched, and then some clever people in a garage in California make up something really big about it that nobody thought of.
We were talking, I mean, there was quite a bit of talk at MWC about inference, AI inference, sort of moving it beyond the stage where, it's been trained. The large language models are trained in the big hyperscaler data facilities, and then people are talking about the opportunity to maybe roll out applications at the edge and not necessarily use NVIDIA chips to do that, but something else. But it sounds like there would need to be a corresponding investment in, if you're building it out at the edge, in fixed line networks or in optical networks to support that sort of thing.
Whatever drives traffic from the network. So there's 2 important things that drive business in this sector. One is the more traffic, the bigger the kits underneath and the more business there will be. The second one is the how you drive that traffic. So, because that's another thing that can happen to AI. Today, we require more and more SLAs for certain activities. At the very beginning of internet, that was best effort. I was sending you an email. To be honest, you weren't looking at your PC. If the email came up 5 minutes later, you wouldn't even know, right? Today, okay, we're already expecting teams not to be disrupted when we're talking to each other through our video communication. So there's an SLA expected by people. Again, when it gets industrial, even more. But when you get to AI, maybe even latency is going to be important because you will need to break out the different processes and then reconstruct them in the same order, etc.
Yeah.
So one is about the sheer size of the communications that we will need. The other one is about the quality of the communications on how you need to build them. And that will, again, be another driver for business in this sector.
There's a bit of a slowdown, obviously, going on in terms of telco spending in some parts of the market. I mean, very much on the mobile side. Concern about 5G investments and I think inventory build up in North America. But have you seen anything like that going on in fixed as well, or is it quite different?
It is different on the sense that as we were not linked to like a G, that didn't affect the fixed part as much. There is the second thing that actually happened is that when interest rates came up, some of the companies, telecom service providers and some others, needed to react fairly quickly so that didn't represent a significant hit in their bottom line. And one of the easiest things that you can do short term to try and somehow compensate is to reduce your capex.
Yep.
That is not a sustainable thing. That's a one-off thing. And that actually happened last year. And we saw part of that like the rest of the sector, right? But that's a one-off. That's not something that you can sustain over time. So what we are seeing is even without the interest rates actually changing, we start to see how this is alleviating into this year. Obviously, if then again, and okay, I don't really know, but when you read press, people say, yeah, maybe at around summertime, the interest rates will be a little bit lower by the European Bank and by the SEC, etc. That will further help in coming back to where we were just 12 months ago.
Yeah, but I suppose ultimately, the more traffic there is, the more there's a need to actually just spend money anyway.
And also, these people have done their homework. I mean, again, they started last year with some interest rates. They were surprised, I think we all were, by how rapidly they were increased because of crisis, etc. I don't need to tell you. And when you're a CFO and you need to react very quickly, there's not many tools you have. Yeah, they probably cut travel expenses. I mean, there's not too many things that you can cut so quickly so that it has an impact in maybe not the same quarter, but at least the same year. But these people did their homework as well. And they said, okay, it can't be that if interest rates stay where they are, we just don't buy routers anymore. Of course, we need to continue building the network because that's our bread and butter. This is our tool with which I deliver services and I get money for them. So obviously they did the homework and now they are ready to invest again, even in the circumstances we still live in.
What about in countries where, I mean, you mentioned Spain and you live there, obviously, it's very advanced there. I think the figures are really high, aren't they, for FTTH coverage?
Yeah.
I remember Telefonica coming out last year saying we now think we can sort of cut capital intensity a bit, go down to the 12% level in the next couple of years. But is there a kind of knock-on impact for the infrastructure vendors themselves because they've kind of done the fibre rollout job?
Well, but you're never done in this business, right? Because what we see in Spain as an example, but also in some other countries, is you go to the next wave of FTTH.
Right.
In many of the countries that rolled out later, actually the UK is one, but also the Netherlands, etc., offers came out fairly quickly with not only 1 gig, but maybe 2.5 gigs, 5 gig, 10 gig even, right? There's even people that are starting to offer 25 gig.
Right. This is the next thing that Nokia's behind. Yeah.
What's going to happen in Spain and in a few other countries that went faster, but rolled out literally 1 gig fiber, is they will now upgrade their networks to the next wave, to whatever, 5, 10, 25 gig, whatever they choose.
Yeah.
So there's always the next wave that you need to put in the network. You need to modernize it. You need to make it suitable for the new services.
And this isn't a sort of digging fibre job, but it's putting the boxes in
Correct.
either end, basically.
The good thing is the fiber's already there, because
I was going to ask that just to clarify.
Yeah.
The fibre that is being put down, is that pretty much future-proofed?
That is.
It's not going to need to be replaced for the foreseeable future.
100 years,
absolutely.
hopefully.
100 years,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah. Sorry, you were.
I don't know if it is 100 years. I won't be here to witness that, but definitely there's no intention to replace it at all.
So it's
there,
all about
it's
the
very
stuff
safe.
at either end of the.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
But
And that's all the ponds.
But Nokia
Correct.
wouldn't make money from the actual fibre job
Actually,
itself anyway.
no,
would
that's
you?
like
That's the
warning
good
or
thing.
something.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but when they are rolling out fiber now, it's only a small fraction that goes to telecom. The
Yeah.
bigger chunk of it goes to construction companies.
Yeah.
In that upgrade, in that next rollout, 100% of it stays in telecom, because you don't need to do any digging anymore.
Right.
But I think even with I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but with the later generations that we're talking about, 10 gig and 25 gig, it's more of a software upgrade to some extent anyway. You can keep some of the
It
equipment.
depends on what you rolled out.
Right.
So the kit that we've been rolling out for years now indeed is ready for up to 25 gig. So
Right.
you could just have a software upgrade. You don't even need to change the hardware. Maybe some people might have chosen to put, for instance, at the network side, typically everybody was rolling that out. At the home side, some people might have put just a 1 gig termination. Also, sometimes for commercial reasons. If you want to upgrade to 5 gig, I'll send you another box. And you will see it's newer, it's nicer. It may come with the newest flavors of Wi-Fi, for instance. Now that you have 5 gig fiber at home, maybe you want Wi-Fi 7 as well. So, but again,
Got to
there's-
constantly address choke points when you're upgrading. haven't you?
Exactly,
Yeah.
just to avoid that. But hey, they could have rolled out the best ONT, and then it would be just a software upgrade.
Yeah.
Most certainly in the network side it will be. But then again, people who started first, that technology was not existing yet, so they just rolled out 1 gig fiber, because that's what in the early days that's what existed. And
So if-
these people will need to do a hardware.
So if you're doing, is it XGS is the 10?
That
10,
is the
and then you've
technical.
got these, the Quillian chipsets, is it? That would
We
be
do have-
upgradable to 25 gig.
So
potentially.
Quillian is the core, the brains of that. So
Yeah.
that's the chip with which we power the whole brains of that fiber connection. And indeed, it can handle from 1 gig to 25 gig. It's just software, what you need to change. There's no hardware changes.
Right.
So anybody who started rolling out Quillian-based hardware, they're safe. They only need to upgrade the software.
And is there anybody else, I mean, in the sort of competitive environment, is there anybody else behind 25 gig in the same? Because Nokia's made a big push on that. And I know some other companies have gone after the 50 gig thing a bit more and it's saying, let's wait and see.
So there's companies betting on 25 and companies betting on 50. We definitely are betting on 25 and 50. I mean,
Right.
50 is also going to happen. And 100, I'm sure. I mean, it's a little bit like the gigs. We don't give it a gig, a G, but it's going to happen.
We might be 80 years old when that happens.
Well, but it does. It's interesting with the Gs. It does. You know, when I wrote a piece. In fact, I should give a shout out. We got another colleague of yours in the room, Paul Adams, and he's responsible for bringing some beers. We're only not drinking them because apparently they're at fridges where you bought them. But he's bought some neck oil, which is a favourite, and also he's bought one I'd never heard of before. I was shitting myself a bit when I saw it.
I've heard of that.
Never heard
It
of
looked
that
like
one
one of
either.
those ones that's like 7%.
It's very similar to Hazy J.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
good.
Lunar Haze. So
Easy IPA. That's
so it's similar to what you got there.
Yeah, that sounds
Raf is
interesting.
having one of our Hazy Janes. So this is their equivalent of Hazy Janes. So thanks, Paul. Anyway, the other reason I mentioned Paul is that he mentioned that he'd read a wrap up of Mobile World Congress that I wrote, where my headline was Groundhog Day, just saying, you know, it felt very similar to the previous year's conversations. But I sort of, having made that sort of slightly scathing initial point, I tried to row it back a little bit to go, well, but then again, do I have any right to expect anything else? I mean, how easy is it for each year for in this case, primarily the mobile industry, but let's just say the telecoms industry, full stop, for it to generate really novel, exciting new narratives and topics to make it easy, to make the job of being a trade journalist like me easy. So it is incremental, and it is, it's not very exciting sometimes, and that's fine. That's where we are.
I think it's very exciting, although it is incremental. I think mobile moves in steps. There is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 gig, and there's people these days investigating on what 6G is going to be, etc. The rest of the network moves in a continuous.
Well, this is a point I was leading up to, and one point I made in that story is that I just think the concept of the Gs, obviously that's very much a mobile-centric thing, is increasingly unhelpful. And the world that you've always been in on the fixed side, where no one goes on about generations, and you don't have these 10-year sort of presumed upgrade cycles, seems a lot more realistic. It's just harder to create a buzz around, and of course we don't get buzz.
There's an overlap though, because the operators themselves will still market gigabits per second. They'll still say, like you'd see Virgin Media saying, we're the only company that can do 200 megabits per second
or 2 gig or whatever.
And then it goes up to 1 gig, and then it's in the future people will be talking about 10 gig services or whatever. But
it's also, think about it. I mean, you do need to make your product understandable for the 50 million people who live in the UK? I don't know the number anymore, but maybe more.
I still struggle, and I've been a telecoms journalist for 10 years.
So you really need to give some wrapping around what it is that we're giving to you, and it's somewhat complex for people who are not in this world to go and understand it. So I can understand why the BTs of this world, or the Everything Everywheres, or Vodafones want to make it understandable for their customers. But okay, in the back office, in building all that, there's a lot of exciting things going on. I'll give you one. So, for instance, one of the things that I spoke about at Mobile World Congress with a lot of people was the need to have the information that is transmitted on top of those networks 100% secure.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of cryptography out there, but people are worried about what's going to happen when bad hands get onto a quantum computer. In the past, that seemed like a remote danger. When will a mafia or any of those gangs get their hands on a quantum computer? Maybe not in a decade. Okay, the world is not what the world used to be 2 years ago. And now people are thinking, some governments might actually get their hands on one of those computers much more earlier. Because clearly they will have the resources. And who tells us that a fraction of the usage of those computers is not put to the service of espionage or I don't know what, right? So what used to be a problem for a decade from now is now a problem of today. Because to make things harder, people are discussing, you could harvest today and decipher tomorrow. If one of those governments is going to have a quantum computer in 2 years from now, they could be spying on our communications today, load them on a server, and then decipher them, because all the cryptography we have today is crackable in minutes with one of those computers. So it's actually
everything falls off a cliff.
And it's actually quite dangerous because, there could be top secrets that the UK government is transmitting today that could be just being stored in a server somewhere to be deciphered by another government in a couple of years.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the Netflix series on this where this happens. People wake up and everything's gone wrong. And it's
Now I'm going to give you the solution. We actually have quantum-safe cryptography available today.
Right.
It can be done. So there's codes that...
And so by quantum-safe, you mean cryptography that's so good that even quantum computers couldn't crack it? Yeah.
Correct. So, and that actually is quite exciting. Okay, maybe I get excited on things that other people don't.
It's all right. That's actually you're among friends, Rafa.
Yeah,
it's fairly important.
It is because, the level of R&D and intelligence required to bring that forward into our reality. Bell Labs is part of our company and some other really clever people. So not me. Nokia actually does have clever people. So all the efforts that are required to put that forward and to make them available for the networks of today so that we can offer this kind of service to our customers, it is exciting. I mean, there's a lot to be done to make that happen and to give a practical solution to a practical problem that people have. Even better, to provide an opportunity for service providers and industries to do things better than they were doing them only a few months ago.
So is that your bit that would do a lot of the research into quantum stuff? It's on the infrastructure side where that takes place.
Yeah.
Because I know BT gets very excited about this. Howard Watson at BT is like really into the whole.
They got all their stuff in Ipswich.
It's super important. A lot of people are working on that at different layers, by the way. So what we try to provide is we will provide a transport layer that properly encoded is immune to any cracking by a quantum computer. Of course, on top of that, there will be an application layer, probably. Okay, we get into technicalities here, but the one that we provide is at infrastructure layer, and it is symmetrical. So there are codes that only the two endpoints know that are safely delivered to those two endpoints, and then they can have a safe communication from one point in the network to another point in the network. On top of that, anyway, when you connect to your bank account, you're going to have another layer of cryptography that today is crackable by a quantum computer. But okay, there aren't many quantum computers around, but that is crackable today. But it provides a level of security for the duration of that communication. That actually is done in an asymmetrical way. There is a public and a private key that are used, which makes it easier to crack in the future with quantum computers, etc., etc. So there's a lot of people working on both. And actually, this one requires a lot more effort. It's not finished yet, but there's people that are working on that, and we will get there as well. The one underneath is available today. So there's and that is just, again, still on security. But I could give you many other exciting examples. Still on security. So another problem that people have is the other big thing that the bad guys are doing these days is sending tons of packets to a server, to a router, to
DDoS stuff.
DDoS stuff, right? They stopped the hospitals in this country, or the railways in another, or a big bank somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
That actually you can't control. I mean, we've got what we call scrubbing centers. We drive the suspicious packets to a scrubbing center, and as typically they are created by farms of PCs, that replication of the packets leaves a signature that we can detect and drop the bad packet. Good. Except the bad guys get a little bit more clever every day. And the next thing is botnets, of course. So they don't replicate the packets using a farm of PCs. They just go out and hack the air conditioning machines, the refrigerators, the whatever, the appliances that each and every one of us have in our houses that nobody ever changes the password of. No. If anybody ever changed the password of their refrigerator, please raise your hands, because I don't have a refrigerator connected to the internet, but I have other appliances. Yeah. I never changed the password myself. So you actually hack those appliances, and then you ask them to send packets to whatever, the Ministry of Defense.
Wi-Fi routers, nobody ever changes those.
For instance, so all those hackable things, they will send legitimate packets. You can't actually try to find a signature.
The bad stuff.
The only thing is that there's no reason why all the refrigerators in the country should be communicating to the Ministry of Defense at the same time. We do have software.
I think the smart fridge is yet to take off.
Some might. But we do have software AI-based, and now I give you the beautiful words in my example. We have AI-based software that is able to inspect the traffic in the UK or in a region or whatever you guys want and detect, hey, that ain't right. And they actually can stop those malicious packets, not based on a signature, but based on the shape of the traffic that is happening at that point of time. Again, what I call another exciting solution for a problem or another exciting opportunity. And you guys realize I'm getting excited on things that normal people typically don't.
Rafa, this is called the Telecoms.com podcast.
Hey, there we go.
We're not chatting about
I'm among
sport
friends.
and movies.
Good.
Yeah.
I get excited about basketball as well, by the way.
There we go.
I'm normal. I'm normal.
People can relate to that maybe more, the average person,
There we
the
go.
basketball. But does Nokia get involved in actually quantum computer development itself, trying to build one of these super duper machines that could do all these?
No, we're in telecoms.
Yeah.
We're in telecoms.
Okay.
But to be honest, the guys at Bell Labs do basic research.
That's what I was thinking.
So it is possible, but I don't know everything they do. So it is possible that they are now working on something that finally is a contribution to that level because they do basic research. But honestly, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm gonna butt in just because we're a bit short of time.
Are we?
Please do.
Well, already?
Well, we are because Rafa's literally got a plane to
Yeah, I know.
Apologies,
I do know this.
we got maximum half an hour left, and there's just I want to give Rafa a chance to sort of wrap up this bit, and then we want to see if we can cover one or two other news bits. As ever, Rafa, if we bring up anything in the news that's professionally sensitive to you, just feel free to dodge it. That's absolutely fine.
We'll do.
Just one thing I want to ask, and then I'll also ask you if there's anything else prior to coming on this that you wanted to mention about your part of what you do professionally, what you do at Nokia. But I was just looking when you were chatting earlier, when Ian was asking you about the market on the whole.
Yep.
And you're saying it looks like it's going to pick up. That reminded me of your last quarterlies, and I was just reminding myself of what your CEO, Pekka Lundmark, said. This is a quote from him. He goes, looking ahead, we expect a challenging environment 2023 to continue during the first half of 24, especially in the first quarter. However, we're now starting to see some green shoots on the horizon. Slightly mixing his metaphors there, but we'll let him off. It's not his first language. With improving order intake for network infrastructure, that's you,
There we go.
and some of the specific deals we've won. And then the second bit I quoted him saying is, this is expected to drive strong improvement in network infrastructure, net sales growth in the second half of 2024. And he said, mobile networks, not so much, to paraphrase him. So just recap why your bit is looking a bit more rosy for the second half of this year. Is it just the upgrade cycle you were talking about? It's just pent-up demand, or is there other reasons?
So again, the thing about mobile and moving in steps means you have bits of big investment when another generation is being rolled out, followed by valleys. It's a kind of
peaks and troughs.
That's the nature of mobile networks. While fixed networks or network infrastructure in the Nokia terminology is more of a continuous.
Yeah.
We do cater for the extra traffic that comes from 5G when it is rolled out, for sure. So that's part of the increment that we have.
So
but in parallel to that, or during the valley, we are also taking care of the traffic generated by FTTH rollouts. In parallel to that, maybe we get another boost in the future about the AI new centers of excellence that you were talking about before. There's multiple forces that drive further traffic. Again, on one hand, traffic, just amount of traffic. On the other one, the how that traffic needs to be catered for. That's also a source of business because we need to do things in a different way, and that will require some upgrades or some improvements in software or whatever. And there's multiple forces pulling from that business and making it increase over time in a more continuous way than mobile networks.
Cool.
I think also the mobile, like all the vendors were hurt by inventory build up on the mobile side in North America, which is the biggest market, so which wasn't a factor as much. But do you see any of the? I mean, maybe it's almost a wrapping up question, but in terms of the competitive dynamics, there's been a lot of concern in the RAN sector about a few big vendors. Let's try and get more competition in there. We've got this thing called Open RAN, obviously, but if you look at the fixed access market, I mean, Nokia is really the biggest one outside China. And there's interest. I know companies like Ciena trying to go into broadband access a little bit more, and there's some other kind of new entrants in there. But do you see any kind of change in the competitive dynamics in the market at all? Or?
So each and every one of the different businesses we're in is a healthy business in the sense there's a number of competitors. You go to optical networks, and you mentioned Ciena, but there's several others that compete on that market. Same thing in IP. You've got the usual suspects building routers. Same thing in FTTH, etc. They're different vendors, though. Ciena, indeed, is only playing in optics, really. I mean, not quite much in IP and fixed networks. And if you pick another example coming from any of the other markets, they typically play on that market only. Nokia does play in all three, which gives us some advantages. So it gives us, first of all, the advantage to understand the different businesses. You mentioned before, rightfully so, IP and optics, they're very connected, right? So for an IP vendor, understanding deeply what happens underneath is very important. We will build better routers because we understand the optical layer, and vice versa, because we know what's the use that is going to be done. We can do things jointly, coordinated, etc. Same thing about fiber. So one advantage is just the knowledge of it all. Another advantage is in serving the smaller customers. Typically, again, BT, to use an example in the UK, they will buy separately the different networks. But when you go to smaller players, tier 2s in different countries that are smaller than the UK, or enterprises, it's very nice for Nokia to be able to give them a full solution. Hey, don't worry about that. You want to roll out some fiber, but you need to backhaul that with IP and optics. We provide the totality of the solution. Yep. It gives us multiple advantages. But again, on each and every one of the markets on their own, I think they're healthy. There's enough competitors in each and every market. Different competitors, though.
Yep.
Cool. All right, I'm gonna move it on from the fixed line stuff, unless there's any last thoughts you want to share about it from your point of view.
I could be talking for hours, as you can understand by now. But,
yeah, well, indeed. Well, that's one of the reasons why this I sometimes
I've
get
got other
criticised.
questions, but we can do it another time.
Okay.
Yeah,
if you buy me another beer, I might come again.
Yeah, well, there's another one here if you want it.
No, I'm good. I'm okay with
I was going to ask about Open RAN and the opportunity for you there on front haul, but
go on, I'll allow it.
We'll get there.
Okay, all right, we'll get there. Ian, we were just chatting about, so, we don't really, they're not very organised, these podcasts, as I'm sure you can tell being on it.
That's good.
But we do have a quick chat beforehand, Ian and I, like, what have we covered this week that we think would be worth chatting about? And Ian, I've already forgotten what you flagged up, and I don't know to what extent we might have touched on it already, but what was the thing that we chatted immediately beforehand that you thought would be worth bringing up?
I was talking about Leap in Saudi Arabia.
And in what context? What about it?
Specifically what Aramco's doing there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's worth mentioning. It's worth mentioning Leap. In fact, this is an interesting. Sorry for butting in, but so we heard. I think you had some contact. I'll let you name them or not, depending on whether you decide it's appropriate, Ian. But you were speaking to some senior contact in the telecoms world that said that they put Leap right up there.
Yeah, I don't want to name that person.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. That it's a really important event, and it was slightly embarrassing because Ian and I were chatting about it, and I was going, I don't really know shit about this Leap event. And then we went and looked into it. Turns out it's run by Informer. So
congratulations.
Yeah. So haven't we done well? But it's quite a new event.
Since 2022.
And it's run by an Informer company called Tahaluf.
Yeah.
And in partnership with the sort of Saudi
government
state. Yeah. But it's really huge. Did you say about 100,000 people? That's the size of Mobile Congress.
100,000, I think, in 2022.
Yeah.
Don't know what it was last year, but it's on this week.
So it's a big deal event. And what was it about it?
Well, I thought it was interesting because I reached out because my interviews at Mobile World Congress, you go out and you sort of line up all your interviews and then you go over there and spend sort of several days like having meetings and your head's spinning by the end of it. But one person I wanted to meet was Tarek Amin, who used to be at Rakuten in Japan, which Nokia obviously knows because we've got a relationship with them. But he'd left and moved back to the Middle East and then very quickly joined Saudi Aramco. And you're thinking, why is he at Saudi Aramco? This is an energy company. What's this got to do with what he was doing before? And they set up.
But is it the biggest company in the world?
Well, it's the biggest non-technological company in the world, I think,
by
in terms of market cap. Yeah. And they've set up this unit called Aramco Digital. And it's all been a little bit mysterious. And he's made various.
But Tarek Amin's a really big name to recruit.
He's quite a charismatic character, and he generated a lot of publicity for Rakuten when he was there, obviously, in the building of the network in Japan, and then the Symphony unit.
And he'd been at Geo before, hadn't he?
He'd been at Geo before that, and then I think he was at Huawei going back before that. Yeah, I mean, he's a charismatic character. He's a good sort of speaker, and he's got interesting ideas and views about things.
Some people would even drive across Barcelona to see him, wouldn't they?
Yeah, well, yeah. So I went and met him in his hotel in Barcelona, in the W Hotel.
Yeah.
And to get
Barcelona is easy to drive during Mobile World
Well,
Congress.
Oh, yeah.
Traffic jams.
No traffic at all.
So they were there like
It's okay.
texting me,
God damn.
"Where are you?" on the way there.
I can
But,
imagine.
Yeah.
But Aramco Digital has got this. I mean, they've got some access to the funds that the venture capital unit of Saudi Aramco has, which is about $7.5 billion, I think, at the moment. They want to spend on different things, and technology is a really big priority for Saudi Arabia because they're trying to diversify away from energy. They're spending a lot of money. There's a big thing on sport at the moment, obviously trying to get sports teams over there and lure the top footballers. And technology is like a big push.
They got Cristiano Ronaldo.
Unsurprisingly.
And they got that golf. That was all a lot of drama in the
totally.
golf, wasn't there?
So his vision, and it's not surprising to hear him say it because he comes out with these big statements about revolutionising sectors and everything. And it's not so telecom related, but he wants to do. He says they've basically charged me with creating a kind of Google for the Middle East.
Wow.
And it doesn't mean going out and building like the data centers and putting in fibre in the ground because a lot of that's been done, and they have relationships with the hyperscalers anyway. But they're trying to do a lot of the AI on top of that, like do AI infrastructure as a service. So basically have Aramco Digital making investments in GPUs, in other chips, making investment in AI applications, and then kind of giving pay-as-you-go access to those to other companies in the region. So it will start off in Saudi Arabia, and then it goes to other countries in like North Africa and the Middle East.
And back to Rafa's day job, that access obviously all gets done over those networks.
And he mentioned a specific company when I spoke with him called Grok, which is GROQ, the way they
right,
spell it.
not to be confused with the Elon Musk.
Well, the
AI
word grok comes from a science fiction novel by Robert Heinlein called Stranger in a Strange Land.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
There's an Iron Maiden song about that.
Right. So Stranger in a Strange Land's about a guy it's a science fiction novel about a guy who returns to Earth from Mars. Mars has been colonized and it has life on it, and he comes back and groks are supposed to be a Martian word that means to understand, basically. But it's one of those trendy things that people in the tech.
I've heard people use it as understand. I grok that. I heard someone say it.
I grok that. Well, Gabe said it actually. On the
that was it. Yeah, it was on the pod. And I didn't know what fuck he was on about.
It's like a word. Yeah. So various trendy tech companies like to use the word to sort of name a company after, but they've changed the last letter, so it's GROQ.
Okay. So
but they're doing language processing units. So we've got all these different types of processing unit at the moment, and they're doing a new type of chip that would potentially be good for AI inference. So putting it at the edge, like reducing latency, more energy efficient, let's say, than a GPU. The guy who runs it's really interesting. He's called Jonathan Ross, not the one that you'll know from the UK, but he used to be at Google, and the tensor processing units that Google does, he was the man behind that. And so they've raised some money in from various venture funds, and Tariq Amin said we're working with this company because the sort of AI applications we want to do could be really kind of good on these LPUs, basically. And then they announced not a kind of formal, we're investing in you and we're going to sort of start deploying applications on your chips, but an arrangement, an MOU at Leap, I think yesterday or the day before, which is quite handy because it sort of coincided when I was sticking my stuff up.
It's a bit punishing to have Leap just straight after Mobile World Congress, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I know people who've gone over there and I think they'll be exhausted now.
They're probably being a bit more sensible. Well, actually, what we haven't had a chance to say, because the last podcast we recorded was from the show floor on the Wednesday of Mobile World Congress.
Oh, really?
But we flew back the next day. But me and Andrew, and our flight was about midday, so we had to sort of be in a cab by 10 o'clock. Me and Andrew didn't get to bed till 6 in the morning.
Oh my God.
So that was hardcore.
You were at MWC though as well.
I
You
was
must have
there,
had a tiring week.
I was there.
Yeah.
It's a tiring week because you get to see a lot of people. I mean, Mobile World Congress for me has the value that I get to see a lot of people in 3 days, right?
Yeah.
It's a condensed experience.
And it's
isn't
a
it?
very condensed experience, and it's interesting to just to put together what are the different questions that people ask you, and is there like a common theme or a couple of common themes that tells you something about the buzz in the business. So I think it's interesting.
Yeah, that is. I mean, I spoke to one person. I quoted them anonymously in my write-up, saying that they think of it as a great big alignment call, which is a word I hadn't heard before, but it's like a corporate term, which perhaps you're familiar with, where everyone just sort of gets on the phone to make sure they're all singing from the same hymn sheet, sort of thing. And increasingly in many previous years where I've written it up, I've been really critical of that, and like earlier on in the 5G cycle, the overhyping of it, which I think every criticism I made of that has been justified in hindsight, but there we go.
No.
But yeah, I do think, fair enough, the purpose of things like that isn't to generate easy narratives for people like me and Ian. It is for everyone to get to go, no. But then again, it just means that we've got to work harder to justify our existence.
There we go.
But it is for everyone to get together and compare notes and obviously do business in principle. Or whether or not you actually sign deals, you certainly can, establish business relationships and all that sort of thing. And it's probably very efficient in that way. It's just that when you've got a specific thing, like I presume you spend a lot of your time just on the Nokia stand, meeting people or going, or at least sticking with predetermined appointments. But people who are just having to wander around, it's just mental, just bumping into everyone.
Well,
I typically have those prearranged meetings. And my responsibility in Nokia these days is Europe.
Yeah.
But at different points of my career, I've run Middle East and Africa as a region or Latin America. So, okay, still in Europe, hey, I came here for the day. I can do in 3 days, I can do 3 countries. It's okay. It's not the same efficiency as having them all together in Barcelona, but it's all right. But now think Africa. Yeah. In Africa, getting to different places is a different story. Well, so actually having them all in Barcelona was wonderful.
That was one other thing I wanted to say on the back of Ian flagging up this LEAP event, about which I knew fuck all until this afternoon, and I should have known, to my shame. Although Informer, you could have done a better job of sending me the memo, you know what I mean? I don't necessarily want to dwell on this, but it's an interesting thing. One of the other things I noticed in my write-up at World Congress is that we always expect a strong presence of certain Chinese companies, be it vendors or operators. And I always think that's interesting when you consider what a sort of hostile environment we've created in the West towards Chinese companies. But what really struck me is more than ever a really strong presence of Middle Eastern companies, especially the operators.
Yeah,
and
I think that was pretty big there.
And they had the most. I think they had the most buzzy gimmick on their stand of that AI robot that had facial expressions.
I saw that one. They were in front of the Nokia stand. So.
Oh, of course they were. Yeah, I think there's like half of your logo in my photo that I put in it.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard of LEAP, by the way, before last week, because the person who told me about it was Tariq Amin, and if I'd known at the time that we owned it, I'd have gone, oh yeah, that's
so it means your company is very consistent in the way they communicate to their staff about it.
It is, totally, yeah.
It's okay, so nothing personal with you.
No.
So he's like, we're going to announce this operating system. We do like an enterprise operating system that's AI-based, called Noor OS, so Noor is an Arabic word for light, and the idea basically is that you get rid of the visible.
You see, we're back at the optical layer.
Yeah,
there we go.
Yeah. But you said, imagine if you open your Mac and you don't see separate apps, you just have a prompt and you can sort of speak to an AI and it would find information for you, like say how many employees do we have or how many vacation days do I have left. That's what they're doing. And he said we're announcing
another exciting thing I'm going to throw at you. We do something similar in our routers.
Right.
The routers and switches that we put in our data centers are slightly different from the ones that we put in the big area network communications we've been talking about. In the data centers, you have some specific different needs and all that. And we've got an operating system that is fairly open, and we can write applications on top of that. And one of the applications we wrote is based on AI. And the whole idea of it is you can ask questions in plain language. So rather than being a proper engineer and knowing all the commands with the commas and the numbers, you can actually say, so what's the status of my network? And it would reply back in proper English, this is what's happening with your BGP nodes or whatever it is that you asked. By the way, you can even ask in a different language, or you can even ask in English and say, but answer to me back in Spanish if you want to make it difficult.
Yeah.
So
But that real-time translate thing is something really appealing. About, it just removes all language barriers.
Well, this is what Grok's doing.
Right.
This is where these language processing units might be useful because they're real-time. You cut the latency, and you could have apps like that potentially.
But everyone's just got a Babel fish in their ear.
Well, I mean, that hasn't been talked about at that level, but
you can see it. Yeah. I mean, I just want to make one point, and then I'm going to quickly move on to the last thing, which will probably just be mainly me banging on about my story because we've only got about. What we got about like 10 minutes max?
Banging on about your book?
Not my book. No. I've given up beating that dead horse. With the AI and what you were both just talking about, how it sort of does more and more of the heavy lifting for you. And that's all good, but I do get slightly worried. I think it's a trust thing, and and it's stuff that's quite topical at the moment, like whether these LLMs are biased and all that sort of thing. And we're still early days, but that's my, and I made a joke earlier where you went, the sky's the limit, and I said the Skynet's the limit, because I always end up bringing it back to Terminator whenever we talk about AI. That's my concern. If suddenly, think of the paradigm, the early AI paradigms we've got with things like Alexa, the Amazon thing, and I've got friends where they go, Alexa, play me some music that I'll like. There's a part of me, this could just be my personality, where I just bristle at that. I'm like, fuck off, Alexa. I'll pick what I like. There's some uppity bastard computer cheats for me.
Well, that's the way it's going. You'll just get told what to.
Well, exactly. And then on a more profound level, the more we rely on them.
Eat this now.
Yeah, exactly. Scott, I've calculated. This is bad for you. I've calculated that it's time for you to go to the bog. Because, anyway. And that's my worry. But I admit this is a bit Luddite, and in some ways, any interaction I have with a computer using a graphical user interface is an interface over and above the code, and it's doing that. So I do get it. It's just a trust thing for me, and I think that's going to be an interesting thing for them to do, to deal with people like me. Some people will just embrace it and they'll just surrender to it. But for those a bit more resistant like me, I think the trust side of it is going to... and every time, like we had a thing just before my World Congress, I think, where Google's got a search thing, and someone asked them, like, give me images of US presidents. And then it only came up, I'm not even going to elaborate because it's getting into slightly tasty sort of culture wars territory, but it only came up with a certain angle on it, which implied a degree of bias.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, so there's all that stuff. Yeah. So, yeah, there's that. But, mate, sorry, I'm going to have to cut you short just because Rafa's nearly out of time. I want to mention this one last segment, which I think is interesting. I was talking to you a bit. I never quite finished telling you about it beforehand, which is this big European mega regulation legislation called the Digital Markets Act that's just come into effect this week. And the reason it's interesting, and again, Rafa, this could be something you got no on the record comment on. The reason it's interesting this week is that the point of the Digital Markets Act is Europe going, there's these big digital platforms, principally American ones, that dominate the dominate the space.
They're all American ones, aren't they? Except
for ByteDance, which is TikTok, and it's Chinese.
Oh, yeah.
Which is leading to all kinds of other moral panics in the States, because as far as I can say, anything Chinese is moody. But yeah, the rest of them American. I think the other ones like Apple, Amazon, Google, Twitter, and Facebook.
Twitter,
Meta.
Really? I don't use it anymore.
Twitter's by far the smallest in terms of market cap, but in terms of influence in terms of the digital public discussion, it's still quite big. Anyway, and what they're saying is
X, as you should call it.
X,
now.
as we
X
should call it,
fine.
or whatever Elon Musk in his peak changes it to next. Yeah, and their central point, and you know me, I often say on the pod, I'm sort of instinctively a little bit hostile to the EU because I think it's very imperious and unaccountable and slow. But it does have its moments, and it's actually the perfect vehicle for taking on massive organisations like American big tech. And what they're basically saying is to these platforms is, you've got a de facto monopoly in the areas you are. Let's say in Amazon, it could be e-commerce. And in the case of Google and Apple, in terms of our phones, whatever phone you use, I think you use an iPhone, don't you, Rafa? I use an Android phone. But basically, Apple's got a monopoly of your experience on your phone. Google's got a monopoly of my experience on my phone, especially through the app stores.
Sure.
And they get to charge about a 30% commission on not only app download costs, but any commercial interaction we do through those apps. And you've had people like Epic, which is topical to this, who are the developers behind Fortnite, complaining about this because a lot of games these days get their business models about in-app purchases and little incremental bits of revenue rather than just the cost of buying the game up front. And cut a long story short, the EU, via this Digital Markets Act, DMA, said to Apple, you've got to open up your app store, you've got to open up your platform to let other people have sort of commercial operations on it. And the biggest one is Epic, this developer that does Fortnite. And so Apple, in the end, very grudgingly went, all right, then, Epic, you can have a developer account to open up an Epic store on iOS, and then people can buy stuff directly from you and circumvent us. And Apple, for obvious self-interested reasons, resents doing it, and that's why regulation's important. It was imposed on them. And then, so that was about mid-February, and then 2 weeks later, they kicked them off it again. And the reason they cited was a fairly superficial one, that they just This is
like them
paraphrasing. No, this is paraphrasing. They're basically saying Epic's been dissing us. That's basically what they're saying. Their CEO has been done a couple of tweets that says, Apple can be a bit of a prick sometimes. And they're going, then fuck you. You can't have a developer account anymore. And the interesting thing about it, and then I'll shut up and see if you two have got any comments or questions, and then we'll wrap up, is basically Apple seems to be increasingly being belligerent towards the European Commission, and especially Thierry Breton. And if you look at some of his quotes, I'll see if I can quickly, I should have fired it up. I'm always terrible at this. If you look at some of the way Thierry Breton talks, he's very belligerent and he's very imperious. He's sort of the embodiment of what winds me up about the EU. But then again, if he's doing it to Apple, I warm to him a little bit. It's like when you've got, I don't know, in sport.
You're against both teams.
Well, exactly. Like you're in sport. Let's say, so I'm a Spurs fan. Let's say you've got Arsenal and Chelsea playing each other. You kind of want them to fuck each other up, really, don't you? And that's kind of where I feel. This is kind of where I am on this. And he's coming out with all this stuff, going, you will do what you're told, or we will sue the ass out of you, or something like that.
Is he French? I thought he was Belgian. Well, it sounds the same.
No, I think he is French.
Is he French?
And thank you for recognising it as a French accent.
I was going to say, you found the French accent.
Yeah, that's more French than Belgian.
As opposed to the Belgian French accent.
I wouldn't know how to do a Belgian
good.
accent. I'll just try and be, what's his name? Hercule Poirot,
I can pick out these nuances when he's doing
really
his
good,
French
man.
and he's Belgian.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Oh, God. I've got to say one thing quickly. At Mo World Congress, I'm not going to say anything confidential, but we had dinner with BT, and I was sat opposite a chap called Greg McCall, who's
You're not allowed to say
their
anything.
CTO. No, I'm not going to say anything that he said.
Blacklisted.
But he's got a South African accent, and I had a sort of drunken go at a South African accent, and he just laughed at how shit it was, and it was shit. But his former colleague Neil McRae's been in the pod a few times. I always do a rubbish Neil McRae accent, so I thought it'd only be fair to have a go at that.
Your
one.
French and your Belgian ones are much better.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly.
I don't have a Belgian accent. I wouldn't know where to start.
Work on it.
Let me quickly find Breton's statement. So
I think these big platforms though are good. They're good and bad because they're good because developers want to develop for a community that can reach sort of billions of people potentially. If there's only 2 in the world, then it's great to get people. You get that kind of what is it?
That's a really good point.
Oh, what's the word for it? There's like an economies of scale word for it specifically, but everybody's network effects.
Network effects,
Network
yeah.
effects. Like everybody's using it, and it's like everybody uses Google as a search engine. It's a similar thing.
And as you say, with the APIs in the telco environment, if it's too fragmented, there aren't any of those
this is
economies
the
of
parallel
scale.
I saw was the network APIs thing, which is going on at the moment, and we don't really know how it's going to work out, and it's very much in flux. But on the one hand, the mission itself, in a way, with Kamara and with the way it works commercially, is to probably have one place that people can go to, or a couple of places people can go to develop, and then it works on everybody's networks. But at the same time, the operators themselves don't want to see two big platforms emerge like Vonage and AWS, and maybe they take most of the money. And it's early days, because I'm not saying it's going to go that way, but that would be the
That's where it's very relevant to the DMA, because it is all about platforms. And when you create a platform and loads of other commercial activity is enabled by that platform, you basically become a rent seeker of all that other stuff. Sure. And you can get a piece of the action, and it's right and proper that should be regulated. I found Breton's quote after they announced.
You've got to do it in a French accent.
In English.
You're going to do it in English now.
Yeah. I'll do like a couple of words in a dodgy accent. I'm not going to do a whole paragraph. He goes, the DMA sets precise obligations and the possibility to sanction large online platforms should they not comply. That's what he's always saying. He's always threatening every time. Comply. He's very authoritarian. He used to be
He was at Orange.
He was at Orange, wasn't he? Yeah.
He was Orange.
We've been in discussions with gatekeepers for months to help them adapt. Passive aggressive there. And we can already see changes happening in the market. Competitors can set up alternative app stores. European users have more control over their data and are now empowered to make choices they did not have before due to any default settings. And then his final sentence, in case anyone's in any doubt, any company found to be non-compliant will face severe sanctions, including at last resort a breakup.
Yeah, but he's
so
probably
not
right.
fucking
Someone
around.
needs to be looking at these. Big,
I think he is. And just the final thought, because I think we are out of time, is Apple seems to be going, go on then, do your fucking worst. And it's just quite interesting in a pure soap opera, in a pure drama way. just to see how this is going to play out, because Apple seems to have, and I've heard I listen to quite a lot of American podcasts. A lot of Yanks are like, who the fuck are these Europeans to tell us what to do? Well, and from their point of view, I can understand it. But seems to be what's going on. Apple's going, shove your DMA, Thierry Breton, and Thierry Breton's going to be going, we'll see about that. So anyway, watch this space. I reckon there's going to be aggro between the European Commission and Apple over this, and it could be quite a good spectator sport. Cool. Look, I don't want you to miss your plane.
Thank you very much.
I'm gonna wrap it up there. Thanks a lot for coming, especially over for this.
Pleasure.
And you're welcome back anytime. It's really interesting. And yeah, I'll leave it there and just say to our audience, thank you for listening, and make sure you join us for the next one.